I'm Charlie Bright of Gold Derby, and today I am speaking with Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr., the host and creator of the show Finding Your Roots with Henry Louis Gates Jr. on PBS. What have been some of the biggest obstacles that you and your researchers have encountered when searching for information about your guest ancestors? And you specifically brought up Ashkenazi Jews and the Pale of Settlement. And I was wondering if you could just go into a bit more detail about that.
Well, if you descend from a group that has been persecuted systematically over hundreds and hundreds of years, like Jews in Eastern Europe, like Irish people who are victims of the Great Famine, the Potato Famine, or African Americans who didn't come here on the Mayflower, then doing their family tree can be extraordinarily difficult. Fortunately, however, we now can use a combination. Well, we can do two things. One, we can finance more and more digitization of records. And I have made that a special project in terms of records from Eastern Europe for Ashkenazi Jews. And I'm very proud of our record in that area. In Ireland, between the devastation from the potato famine and the victimization of the Irish by the British, which was systematic, lots of records have disappeared. Surprisingly, though, if you are a Latinx person, we often can astonishingly take your family tree back 500 years. And the reason is because the conquistadors came largely in, all male ships, obviously, and impregnated or married women of Native American ancestry. So if you have a combination, the Roman Catholic Church, which sent priests out to even the most obscure villages, right? And they would say, presented to me today a male child named Charlie Bright. And they wrote it down in these, to bear witness to God, and to make a record that they performed that baptism. And colonial administrators who were very good about reporting the names of the people in the local population. So because of those two factors, we are able to trace back often 500 years to conquistadors who, came here, came to the New World in the 16th and the 17th centuries. And in many, many cases, those individuals' Y-DNA, that means their mother's line, go not to a white woman from Spain or Portugal, they go to a Native American woman because of the predominance of males to females in the ratio of the population. So there have been lots of surprises that we've been able to give people. And in the case of African Americans, you know what's ironic, Charlie? The only way that you can do African American ancestry back to slavery is paradoxically to find the names of the white people who owned your African American ancestors and look in their records. Because although Black people did not have legal names, were not listed legally unless they were free, and at any point 10 to 12% of the Black population was free before the Civil War, in tax records or estate records or in your will, you would have to say, I leave to my daughter Sarah my slave Jane, which is the name of my great-great-grandmother, and her 3 children. And actually, a crucial document in the research for my family tree said just that. And it was an estate inventory from 1859. And it said that they were freeing my great-great-grandmother in 3 years because of her loyal service, but keeping her 2 children, including 18-month-old Edward Gates, my great-grandfather, in slavery for life, quote unquote. So that just shows you the ironies and paradoxes of tracing family trees, even among oppressed people. And then, of course, if you came on the Mayflower, like Angela Davis's great-great-grandfather did, much to her amazement, then it's a lot easier to trace a family tree because family trees have been built by other people over the years. But, you know, we find the funniest things that I never dreamed of. In the case of Bob Odenkirk, a guy, you know, how could you not like Saul, right? Um, Bob's maternal sixth great grandmother was the official mistress of a German duke in the 1750s. And that connection not only links Bob to many of the royal families of Europe, but it made him the 11th cousin of King Charles, who sits on the throne of the United Kingdom. Now, how do we find this out? The probably because first of all, the mistress was living in the palace with the Duke's legal wife. Maybe she said, "I want some guarantees here," but he signed an affidavit in his own hand, which was written in his own hand, attesting to the fact that when his legal wife died, his mistress would become his legal wife, and that he loved her more than life itself. She had borne him 2 or 3 children, and this was legalized. Unfortunately for Bob's sixth great grandmother, the Duke died before his official wife. So the mistress never became the Duchess. But who would have thought that we would find that kind of document when I started the series all these years ago? It's just incredible. And the reason is the wonders of digitization. And now we can do word searches for names and find their names on the most likely of documents, including an affidavit signed by a duke who was concerned either not to lose his mistress or to protect his mistress.
I'm curious as to, you know, you have such a passion for this, and of course you've made so much of your work about this. Where did your interest in family history and genealogy come from?
I even know the date. I was 9 years old. It was born on July 2nd, 1960, the day we buried my father's father, Edward St. Lawrence Gates. That was the day that my father showed my brother and me a picture of the oldest Gates, following his father's funeral, and then we buried his father. Then we came back to the Gates house for the repast. And without a word, Daddy took my brother and me upstairs and showed us his father's scrapbook collection. And he's looking furiously through these scrapbooks, like 6 or 7 of these scrapbooks. And finally, he found what he was looking for. And my brother and I looked over his shoulder, and it was an obituary dated January the 6th, 1888. And it said, "Died this day in Cumberland, Maryland, Jane Gates, an estimable colored woman." An estimable colored woman. And then he showed us her photograph. And she was in her nursing outfit. She was a midwife. And he said, "This is the oldest Gates. I never want you to forget her name. And I never want you to forget her image." And then he closed the scrapbook after he returned her photograph, returned all the scrapbooks to the armoire. We went downstairs, had the repast. We drove 25 miles home along the Potomac River. This is in the Allegheny Mountains on the Potomac, halfway between Pittsburgh and Washington, D.C. And
yeah, I think that's about I think I'm like 2 hours away from that.
Yeah, you know, Rocky Gap. It's right near Rocky Gap and Deep Creek Lake. Well, the last thing I did before I went to bed was open my red Webster's dictionary that sat on the desk by my bed and look up the word estimable, because I didn't know what it meant. And then I thought, wow, if that funny looking lady's estimable, maybe I'm estimable too. And the next day, after the Black Mill picnic, our school was integrated right away, 1955. I started school in 1956, but our social events were separate. So I went to the colored picnic, as we would have said back in the day. And on the way back, I asked Daddy to buy me a composition book. At Red Bull's newsstand. Red was of Irish descent. And that night, in front of our 12-inch black and white TV, I interviewed my mother and father about what only years later I would learn is called your family tree or your genealogy. I was able to go back to my great-great-grandmother and grandfather on Mama's side, and on Daddy's side, back to Jane Gates with an empty box. And he told me the story of our white progenitor whose identity was a mystery. And as of last weekend, baby, mystery solved. To be revealed in season 11 of Finding Your Roots.
Speaking of the show, the reactions are sometimes some of the most priceless parts of the show. And I think probably one of the most enjoyable aspects of the show. And I was wondering, for you personally, what have been some of your favorite reactions that your guests have had to revelations about their ancestry?
Well, when I did Iliza Shlesinger, like many people of Jewish ancestry, they have no idea what happened to the family members who stayed behind. It's very rare that a whole family migrated to the United States. I mean, think about, I don't know if you have siblings, but in every family, or think about your cousin, and you know it as well as I do. Faced with a choice, you can roll the dice, leave everything behind, come 6,000 miles from Russia to a place where you spoke no English, and make a bet on your future, or you could stay at home where you know everybody, you got a girlfriend down the road, you're going to inherit a tailored apprenticeship. Am I crazy? I'm going to stay here, right? And so many people, over and over again, I found that almost everybody has ancestors who stayed behind. And that was a terrible mistake if you're of Jewish ancestry, without a doubt. So for Iliza, we traced her back to her great-grandmother's name was Esther Shonik, and she was from Rashonj, Russia, which was a shtetl in modern-day Poland. And an arrival record, this at Ellis Island, indicated that Esther left Russia for the United States in 1921 when she was about 22 years old. But at least, tragically, two of Esther's siblings stayed behind, and it was my unfortunate duty to show Iliza the records that they perished in the Holocaust. In fact, we were able to show Iliza the death certificate of one, Esther's own brother, whose name was Lipa, spelled L-I-P-A, who was murdered in Auschwitz. Mandy Patinkin. Mandy Patinkin, I often give lectures about finding your roots, and I use a clip. I use a clip from Ted Leone, who was the first adoptee mystery that we solved for her mother. And I use Mandy Patinkin because he had been to a Holocaust site in Europe, and it not once occurred to him that anyone in his bloodline had perished there. And I showed him, and he just burst into tears. I mean, it brought tears to my eyes. I was, really, really sorry to deliver that news. But if you think about it, it would be virtually impossible to be Jewish, let's say, and living in America and not have some kind of family who were not among the 6 million who perished. I love Monk, and I love Tony Shalhoub. I met him on the Vineyard. We were part of a couple dinner party circuits, and I thought, oh, wow. And I love the incredible Mrs. Maisel as well. But we wanted to do a Muslim people from the Mideast and people of Muslim descent, as well as Armenians. I am, my pharmacy is Skandarian. My secretary's surname is Gazadian. The man who comes and fixes things around the house is Garabedian. And they're all Armenian. And Tony Shalhoub was Armenian. And I always signed the petitions for the Armenian genocide. And I think that's scandalous that Turkey won't admit that. And so Tony was our first Armenian. And I learned so much. Doing these family trees is like having a graduate seminar for me. So I learned that as a warm-up for the the genocide of 1915, the Ottomans were killing Armenians as early as 1895. And one of his ancestors, what we told him the story about a person who was crucified upside down, and it was in a newspaper account. So I think 150,000 Armenians were killed in 1895, and he was just so deeply moved. And in starting with Faces of America in 2009, we did our first Muslim family trees. We did Queen Noor, and we did Dr. Oz. And so doing the family trees from people from that area of the world and of Muslim descent, and Armenians, of course, were Orthodox Christians, is extremely hard as well. And I'm pleased to say that we are, well, let me say, we do it as well as anybody. People ask me all the time, why do you think Finding Your Roots is so popular? And the reason is, in a world riven by division and identitarian politics, people are searching for ways to be reminded that we are members of a human community. And the two recurring subliminal themes of Finding Your Roots are that America is a nation composed of immigrants. Even my African ancestors came here from someplace else. They didn't come here willingly. They were unwilling migrants. And our Native American brothers and sisters, they migrated across the Bering Strait 15,000 years ago. So literally, we are a nation of immigrants, that's first. And secondly, no matter what our physical differences, our apparent differences, our superficial differences, our phenotypic differences, at the level of the genome, we are 99.99% the same. And that's what we remind people of every week. And those two messages need to be driven home today more than ever. 20 years ago, did I think that we would be seeing the kind of ethnic division and tension and warfare that we're seeing? No way. But that's where we are. And so people are killing each other in the name of difference. And we have to fight back against any kind of hatred, whether it's anti-Semitic, Islamophobic, anti-Black, racist, anti-homophobic. Look, in Uganda and in Ghana, Uganda made homosexuality a death sentence. As a Black person, that embarrasses me.
Oh, and there are publications that are publishing names of these people. I think they have a publication in Uganda called the Rolling Stone, and they would publish the name of people that they believed were that, and basically generate witch hunts against people.
Yeah, I mean, what century is this? The 1500s? Whoa. So we have to use, as a group, all of us filmmakers have to use all of our tools to fight back against these trends, not through name calling, but through broadcasting stories that remind us of the fundamental unity of the human community. Those are two of the reasons for the popularity of Finding Roots, two of the reasons for the necessity of Finding Roots. The other reason, I think, is that often the people who become interested in their family trees happen to be 45, 50, 55. Why? You know why? Because they are starting to lose their own family members. And all of a sudden they go, oh, wow, these relationships aren't forever. And though you know that in the abstract, man, when a parent or a close friend dies, it's everything changes. And ancestry and DNA analysis allow us to expand our families in two curious ways. One, by finding ancestors in the past, precisely as we're losing ancestors in the present, it replenishes our family tree. You can, I showed my family tree to a professor yesterday, and she said to me, do you feel like you know these people? Do you feel like you know these people? And I think that's one of the reasons that we see so much wonder on the faces of the guests on Finding Your Roots, because they're getting to know these ancestors whom they never heard of before. And the other way that you are expanding your number of family members is laterally or horizontally through people who are not in the past, but people who are walking around on the face of the earth today. And that is through your DNA cousins. When all of our guests are tested by the two prominent DNA companies, and full disclosure, Ancestry.com, one of them is our lead sponsor, so I'm not allowed to recommend, a DNA company, of course. But for each one, the other one's 23andMe. And for each one, when you get a little email saying, okay, your results are in, and you click on it, and you have your own website. You have Charles Bright's website. And one of the features is called DNA Cousins. And it would say, well, if you happen to have any siblings about which you did not know, it would tell you that. Half siblings, and it would tell you first cousin, second cousin, third cousin, fourth cousin, fifth cousin, sixth cousin. These are people who are alive, with whom you share identical DNA, which means if you had an ideally populated family tree, compared it to their ideally populated family tree, somebody would be the same, that you have a common ancestor. So that means they are really your cousin. And often people contact each other. They invite people to family reunions. That could be funny because sometimes a white family contacts a DNA cousin who happens to be predominantly of African descent, and vice versa, which I think underscores the mission of Finding Roots even more magnificently.
Well, Dr. Gates, thank you so much for joining us. This has been absolutely wonderful, and we wish you all the best over the next couple of months. And to all of our viewers, please like, share, subscribe to this video, and don't forget to go to goldderby.com to update your Emmy predictions and advance the nominations coming out in July. Thanks so much, Dr. Gates.
Thank you, brother. Take care.